Since the dawn of popular music, public figures who shine on stage have always carried with them more than just talent and charisma. Over the decades, powerful voices and captivating presences have shared the spotlight with dark rumors, hushed whispers behind the scenes, and unsettling reports of abrupt changes in behavior. Some of these artists emerge with multiple personalities. Others openly speak about presences surrounding them during the creative process. Are these merely allegories of the artistic mind? Or is there something much older and deeper operating behind these curtains? When names like Megan Fox and Nicki Minaj mention on camera experiences with entities that were not human, part of the public laughs, others ignore it, but a small group of theorists begins to connect dots scattered across decades of interviews, music videos, public appearances, and forgotten symbols. The theory is bold. Reptilian beings, ancient and silent, are allegedly manipulating the entertainment industry. The lingering question is, could some of the biggest names in global music be used as instruments by forces we do not understand? Welcome to another night where mysteries never sleep. I'm Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference for YouTube to share the videos with more people, and for me to keep bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's get into the video. Have you ever stopped to think how some artists seem to change completely overnight? Not just their musical or visual style, but the way they speak, act. Even their eyes seem to carry something else. It's not just fame. There's something more happening behind the scenes of music, something almost no one dares to say out loud. For years, I've been collecting accounts, forgotten interviews, loose backstage comments, and excerpts from biographies that, when placed side by side, tell a story very different from the one we're used to. And that story begins to make sense when you realize that certain patterns repeat with a precision too strange to be coincidence. It all starts with silence. Not the studio silence before recording, but that silence that lingers backstage when an artist starts to feel things. Sound technicians, producers, and even security guards have reported unexplained presences during sessions in legendary studios. Sounds coming from empty places, equipment interference, the feeling of being watched. And when you start hearing the same stories from different places, told by people who don't even know each other, that's when things shift in tone. Studios aren't just rooms with good acoustics. Some were built over ancient lands. Others have such heavy histories they seem more like modern temples. Did you know that many of the most iconic albums in history were recorded in places with hidden pasts and constant reports of paranormal experiences? It might sound exaggerated, until you realize that even the artists themselves avoid commenting on certain episodes publicly. The theory gaining traction among occult researchers is that these locations are energy portals, environments where non-human entities can manifest more easily, especially during moments of intense emotional charge, like a passionate recording session. And according to these theorists, some of these entities are the so-called reptilians. But the pressing question is, why would they be interested in music specifically? Because music hits emotions directly, without filters. It enters through hearing but stirs something deeper. The idea is that artists under the influence of these beings serve as transmitters, spreading messages, sensations, and ideas on a massive scale. Some do it consciously, as part of an agreement. Others, without even realizing it. But how can we recognize when this happens? Well, start observing the patterns. Many artists go through a transformation right after breaking out. They sign with major labels and suddenly appear with strange alter egos, confusing speeches, and surrounded by ancient symbolism, all-seeing eyes, serpents, geometric figures. This isn't just aesthetics. It's there for a reason. Award show performances like the Grammys and VMAs, when closely analyzed, reveal choreography and stage design loaded with esoteric symbols. It's not uncommon to see repeated ritualistic gestures, the use of light and shadow to represent dualities, and even scenes that simulate possession or rebirth. Is it just provocative art, or a message? And it doesn't stop there. Former industry employees have revealed, anonymously of course, that certain artists disappear for weeks before major releases. No one says where they are or what they're doing. When they reappear, they come back with completely out-of-the-box material. And when asked about the process, many deflect or give vague answers, as if they truly can't explain where it came from. Some of these albums contain reversed messages, almost imperceptible noises that cause discomfort, and lyrics that allude to domination, sacrifice, and control. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's hard to ignore that all of this appears in artists who follow exactly the same path within the industry. The bolder among these theorists believe that reptilians not only influence musical production, but use the industry as a kind of ongoing ritual, feeding off the emotional energy that billions of people release when consuming these works. And if that's true, then maybe music isn't just art. Maybe it's a tool. And the lingering question is, how many artists are truly in control of their careers, and how many gave up that control long ago? In 2013, during an interview with MTV, Megan Fox made a comment that, for many people, went unnoticed. But those paying attention felt the weight of what was said. She stated, with an almost disconcerting calm, that she had experiences with beings that were not human. She said she was sober in a studio surrounded by people, and yet she swore there was something else there, something that didn't belong in the environment. At first glance, it might seem like just another strange celebrity remark. But that wasn't the only time she mentioned such episodes. In other interviews, Megan hinted that her sensitivity to presences increased in specific locations. And curiously, these places are usually recording studios, film sets, or silent backstage areas, places where the energy feels heavier, according to the professionals who work in them. When one investigates the history of recordings involving these reports, a pattern begins to emerge. In various testimonies, not just Megan's, studios are described as changing environments. The light feels denser, time slows down, subtly strange sounds fill the empty spaces. Technicians have reported hearing footsteps when no one was there, feeling gentle touches on the shoulder, and even voices picked up by microphones that weren't spoken by any human present. In Megan Fox's case, the matter is even more intriguing because she's one of the few public figures who has never denied these experiences. On the contrary, she has always implied that there are things we don't understand, and that perhaps we shouldn't even try to understand. In an era where celebrities are afraid of seeming weird, she seemed more concerned with warning others than protecting her image. And that's where a point few people explore comes in. Why do so many artists avoid talking about these experiences, while others mention them with an almost unsettling naturalness? Could it be that some have already crossed an invisible line and, in some way, accepted living with these presences? There's a theory suggesting that certain artists are more energetically compatible with these entities. Not by choice, but due to their psychic structure, childhood experiences, traumas, or exposure to extreme situations. And when these conditions align with environments of high vibrational charge, such as studios, contact happens. And it doesn't have to be direct or physical. Sometimes it's just a silent exchange, where inspiration comes from a place the artist can't name. Some of Megan's statements reinforce this idea. In an old interview, she described the experience of filming in abandoned locations as something intoxicating, but not human. She never used words like possessed or haunted, but she left in the air the idea that there was an influence, a presence that didn't need to be seen to be felt, and more importantly, one that seemed to appear when the cameras were rolling. If we consider that these episodes are not isolated, but part of a larger pattern within the entertainment industry, the question changes. It's no longer, why does this happen to her? But rather, how many others does this happen to, but it's never spoken about publicly? The reptilian theory suggests that these entities don't reveal themselves by force. They manifest subtly, gradually, creating a kind of symbiosis with the host. And the creative environment, charged with extreme emotions, would be the perfect setting for this fusion. Some artists, like Megan, seem to resist. Others may embrace it. There's a fine line between inspiration and influence, between what the artist creates and what is whispered in their ear during a moment of vulnerability. When an actress like Megan Fox says she felt non-human presences and maintains the claim even after years, one must at least question, why keep saying it if there isn't something more behind it? And what if deep down these experiences aren't delusions, but signs that something is silently operating behind the scenes, something that watches, approaches, and carefully chooses who it connects with? There's something unsettling about the moment when an artist, at the peak of her career, gives a name, voice, and personality to an entity that lives inside her, and then declares she doesn't understand what that entity says. That's exactly what Nicki Minaj revealed about Roman Zelensky, the alter ego who has accompanied her since her early years of fame. But the strangest part is that this character seems to act on its own. Roman isn't a casual invention. He has a backstory, his own behavior, a distinct voice. He speaks aggressively, harshly, sometimes chaotically. During interviews, Nicki has changed her tone of voice and facial expression when invoking Roman, as if being overtaken by something not entirely under her control. On one occasion, she even said, "Roman says things that I don't even understand." How do you explain that? Some might say it's a creative device, a way to express bold ideas without compromising the artist's image. But when you follow Nicki's statements over the years, you notice she never treated Roman as just a character. There's always a tension when the topic comes up, a hesitation, as if there's something more there, something she herself prefers not to delve into publicly. In a behind-the-scenes documentary, Nicki appears crying alone, saying she feels that something is wrong inside her. And shortly after, she returns to the stage, embodying Roman with an almost supernatural energy. It's in this contrast that conspiracy theorists find their clues. Is Roman merely an artistic creation, or a real entity using Nicki as a channel? This kind of phenomenon, where a person adopts a persona with its own independent traits, is not new. Throughout history, there have been documented cases of writers, artists, and even scientists claiming to receive information or inspiration from entities that introduce themselves with names, voices, and distinct styles. But in pop music, the frequency and intensity of such cases seem to have increased. Roman Zelensky has curious characteristics. The name directly references Roman Polanski, a director known for occult and controversial films, especially Rosemary's Baby. Is that just a coincidence, or a symbolic choice that reveals the nature of what Roman represents? After all, if it were just a random character, why carry a name loaded with so many layers of mystery and controversy? During a 2012 Grammy performance, Nicki staged an exorcism. On stage, dressed as a nun, she interacted with a priest as Roman tried to emerge. The performance shocked not just because of its content, but due to the emotional intensity of Nicki, who later stated that it wasn't her on stage. The audience applauded. If you stop to think about what it really meant, and we're not talking about a one-off event. Roman appears in several songs, music videos, and even interviews. Sometimes Nicki says he's locked in a room, other times that she needs to set him free. These are expressions that, when taken out of the artistic context, sound more like attempts to cope with something she doesn't fully control. Is this creation or manifestation? Psychologists would call this creative dissociation, but others see clear signs of channeling, a process in which an entity communicates through a sensitive individual. And within reptilian theories, this would be one of the most effective forms of influence, not through physical domination, but through the symbolic occupation of identity. If this is true, then Roman isn't just an aesthetic device. He would be a link, a point of contact between something non-human and the audience. And Nicki? Merely the bridge, a body with global reach, through which this entity expresses itself without filters. Art as disguise, performance as ritual. It's disturbing to think that way, but if you've ever felt that some performances are unsettling, even without knowing why, maybe you're picking up exactly what lies beneath the surface. And the lingering question is, how many other artists live with inner voices that might not be their own? Maybe you never noticed, or maybe you felt that discomfort without knowing why. A video that draws you in, but leaves a strange feeling in the air. A glance out of place, a symbolic gesture, a change in expression that happens too quickly. The truth is that behind the aesthetics and choreography, some music videos hide far more than they show. Since the 2000s, music videos have ceased to be just visual extensions of songs. They've become true symbolic pieces, often loaded with elements that only make sense to those who know what to look for. Triangles, covered eyes, mirrors, labyrinths, spiral staircases. Each of these symbols appears repeatedly, as if following a silent script. But why repeat the same symbols across different artists from different countries in completely different musical styles? Is it just aesthetic coincidence, or a secret language being used in plain sight? This is where conspiracy theorists begin to draw connections between hidden symbolism and the presence of entities operating silently through pop culture. Take, for example, videos like Disturbia by Rihanna, Born This Way by Lady Gaga, or E.T. by Katy Perry. They all feature images of imprisoned bodies, glassy eyes, physical transformations, and presences. Masked figures, humanoid shadows, hybrid creatures, almost always in the background, but visible enough to provoke that uncomfortable sensation. Could this be a direct representation of the influence of these entities? Another notable point is the use of eyes. Countless videos show artists with one eye covered, or highlighting a single eye in exaggerated close-ups. It's not just an aesthetic choice. The all-seeing eye is one of the oldest symbols associated with surveillance, control, and occult knowledge. Its repetition, literally or metaphorically, suggests more than style. It suggests a message, and the stares, cold, disconnected, vacant. In some scenes, the artist appears to be present, but their emotional presence vanishes for a few seconds. The gaze becomes frozen as if under a trance. Have you ever noticed that? These are brief moments, but they leave the impression that, in that instant, it wasn't the person who was there. It was something using their body. Moreover, choreographed movements often contain specific gestures. Hands in pyramid positions, arms forming astrological symbols, inverted signs. Many of these movements have roots in ancient rituals, and not by accident. In many cultures, dance has always been a medium of invocation and spiritual connection. The lingering question is, what exactly is being invoked in these performances? There are also the settings. Dark environments, endless hallways, doors opening into voids, thrones in ruined places, or palaces lit by intense artificial light. The contrast between the sacred and the profane, the natural and the digital, appears in a continuous loop. All of this reinforces a silent narrative. The artists are not just expressing themselves, they are being used as pieces in a larger game. Even the mistakes are calculated. Visual glitches, synchronization failures, screen flickers. In theory, they're effects. In practice, many theorists believe they are symbols of rupture, moments when the digital reality cracks and reveals what lies behind the facade. Have you ever considered that these small errors might be deliberate signs? An invitation for those who know how to see beyond the surface? And the most curious thing is that, in interviews, the artists themselves often say that not everything in the video was their idea. Sometimes, it's directors who bring the concept. Other times, the label insists on certain visual elements. But at what point did the artists stop controlling their own image? And who, after all, is deciding how they should be presented? When you start putting together the symbols, gestures, stares, and storylines, you realize there's a hidden narrative being repeated endlessly. It's no longer about the music, it's about what it carries. And the question that echoes is inevitable. Are we watching art or a disguised ritual? When people hear the term reptilians, most imagine a science fiction fantasy, something that belongs to the realm of the absurd. But what if I told you that the presence of the serpent in human culture is much older and far more present than it seems, and that the symbols we see in today's music might be repeating rituals that date back thousands of years? Long before any organized religion, ancient civilizations were already worshipping serpent-like entities. The Sumerians, for example, spoke of the Anunnaki, beings who came from the sky and taught humanity. Many texts describe them with reptilian features. In Egypt, the serpent was on the crown of the pharaohs. In India, the Nagas were half-human, half-snake beings associated with occult knowledge. It's not an isolated myth, it's a global pattern. The serpent, in almost all of these cultures, represents something ambiguous: wisdom and danger, light and darkness, creation and destruction. And when we start to notice the repetition of this symbol in the modern world, especially in the music industry, the question arises, has this ancient worship ever really ended? Or has it just changed stages? Major artists have used the image of the serpent as a central part of their careers. Britney Spears performed at the 2001 VMAs with an albino python draped around her neck. Taylor Swift released an album heavily themed with snakes. Lil Nas X, in Montero, appears in scenes that recreate paradise, the fall, and encounters with demonic figures and serpents. These symbols are no accident. They're there for a reason. The ancient rituals tied to the serpent were secret. They involved music, dance, repetitive sounds, elements that, curiously, are at the heart of today's entertainment industry. The boldest theory says that the cult of the serpent was never interrupted, only adapted to modern times. And that music is now one of the most powerful tools for spreading this cult. Have you ever heard of the concept of a hypnotic rhythm? It's when a sound sequence activates brain regions linked to trance. This was used in shamanic rituals and ancient temples. Today, repetitive beats, almost chanted lyrics, and symbolic choreography have the same effect. But for what purpose? Who benefits from an emotionally vulnerable audience, hooked by rhythms that bypass logic? Researchers of the reptilian theory believe these entities have always sought ways to connect with humans without fully revealing themselves. In the past, it was temples. Today, it's stages. And the artists? They would be the new priests, knowingly or not, guiding the masses through performances that symbolically mimic the same ancient rituals. Record labels, seen by many as ordinary commercial companies, would, in this context, be part of a much larger structure. One that protects and sustains this cult. Have you ever wondered why certain artists, even after scandals and public breakdowns, continue to be promoted, awarded, and kept in the spotlight? What exactly is being protected there? And what about those who rebel? Some artists, upon realizing what's happening, try to break the cycle. They abandon their careers, drastically change their style, or disappear completely. But these cases are rarely discussed. When they surface, they're treated as emotional crises or mental instability. But is that all it is? The cult of the serpent, if it truly exists, doesn't need conscious followers. It feeds on attention, repetition, collective emotion. And in a world where billions consume music daily, the stage is perfect. The lights, the sound, the crowd, all form a modern ritual disguised as a show. And the final question is no longer if this is happening, but how many times have you taken part, without even knowing it? In every conspiracy theory, there comes a point where the line between control and collaboration begins to blur. Until now, we've spoken of artists as possible targets, individuals influenced, manipulated, even possessed by forces operating behind the scenes. But what if some aren't victims? What if they're on the other side? The first clue comes from behavior. Some artists, instead of resisting or avoiding associations with the occult, embrace them. They adopt symbols, stage rituals, speak openly, even if cryptically, about higher forces guiding their creative decisions. And they do it not once, but repeatedly, as part of the narrative they build around their own image. Jay-Z, for example, has been photographed multiple times wearing shirts that say "Do what thou wilt," a phrase directly linked to Aleister Crowley, a central figure in modern occultism. Beyoncé, in several interviews, has spoken of Sasha Fierce, a persona that takes over her on stage. But the most curious part is that, when speaking about it, she describes Sasha as if she were another entity, a presence that fully possesses her during performances. These references aren't hidden. They're out in the open. The problem is that the public has been trained to see everything as marketing, as a character. But what if that's precisely the perfect disguise? To show everything so openly that it seems like nothing, just aesthetic provocation, when in reality, it carries a much deeper meaning. Another intriguing case is Billie Eilish. Since the beginning of her career, she has embodied a dark aesthetic, with lyrics and visuals that deal with loss of control, invisible entities, and a kind of existential void that's hard to ignore. In some videos, she appears as a victim. In others, as the agent of horror itself. This ambiguity feeds the doubt. Is she trying to escape something, or has she allied with it? The issue goes beyond the art. There's a protective structure around certain figures. They are shielded by record labels, protected by the media, and rarely face real downfalls, even amid controversy. This raises the hypothesis that these figures are not merely being used, but fulfill strategic roles. They represent archetypes, fuel narratives, lead entire cultural movements. And then there are the stories of those who tried to walk away. Artists who radically changed their image, denounced the system, or simply vanished from the scene. Some claim to have been followed, others fell into disrepute, labeled as crazy. Dave Chappelle, for example, walked away from his own show and disappeared for years, claiming that strange things were happening behind the scenes. Years later, he returned, but visibly changed. And this is where the most uncomfortable question arises. Could it be that some artists surrendered their own control in exchange for success, fully aware of what they were getting into? Because, within the logic of reptilian theories, individual consent would be a crucial part of the pact. Nothing would be forced, everything would be offered. And if that's the case, the industry would be divided between those chosen for their vulnerability and those who volunteered. The former would be disposable pieces. The latter, pillars of the system. Icons with the power to influence millions, shaping behavior, opinion, belief, without the audience even realizing it. The collaboration between humans and reptilians is one of the most delicate parts of this theory, because it points to something beyond manipulation. It reveals complicity, a silent partnership operating on symbolic, energetic, and invisible levels. And if it truly exists, then maybe the biggest question isn't who is being used, but who actually wants to stay in the game, and why. The line between art and manipulation may have never been thinner. When ancient symbols reappear en masse, when unrecognized voices take the stage, and when unnameable experiences become part of the creative process, the question is no longer whether something is wrong, but what exactly is happening behind what we call entertainment. It's not about accusing names or pointing fingers. It's about observing the patterns no one wants to see. Because sometimes the answers are right there, hidden in plain sight. This story is just one piece, and one day you might see the whole puzzle. If this made you think, subscribe, like the video. It helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share it, because more voices mean more discoveries.